In this video, I'll be making this drawing realistic. Let's go, bring it into Photoshop, and start her up. Let's go. First things first, I use the pen tool to create shapes. This helps me to create a base outline for each individual body part that I want to put textures and shadows on later. I put a green body for the start, and that will remain a base plate. Next, I move on to the brain hat, creating the strip that holds the actual jar to the head. Then I fix up everything that went wrong because I need to be super picky, because later on it'll be important and I need it to be perfect, which is why I'm taking my time with this. As you can see, fixing up every little detail to make sure that everything connects, because otherwise there'll be a big fat gap somewhere and I won't know why that's the case. Which is why I put the tentacles in separate layers, so that later on I can fix anything that goes wrong, or I can actually put shadows on more efficiently because they're on separate layers, and I can just attach the shadows to those layers without having to worry about going outside the lines. Now, the reason I'm doing them different colors right now is because then I can identify them, but later on I will make them the same green so that they're more representative of the creature. Next, I do the tongue as the second to last addition to the shapes, and then I do the brain, and now it can function. Now I use the shadows, which creates a exposure layer to darken the layer underneath, and I use a pen tablet to basically paint on any shadows anywhere I want, and it can be clipped to the layer so that I don't draw out the lines, just like I did with the shapes. See, that's why it's so important to have shapes and use it as a underlying base layer so that you don't go out the lines, because otherwise something like this part with the tentacles would be extremely tricky to do and I would be cursing all over the place. As you can see, it's starting to look very 3D, and I'm very happy with how the tentacles look, because I struggle a lot with the different 3D aspects and where to put the shadows, but I'm starting to actually like this, so it's starting to turn into something. Yay! As you can see, the shadows make it look actually 3D, which is quite nice. The only problem is I didn't label my layers, so absolutely silly me, I don't actually know which layer I'm painting on, so I have to actually manually pick it out. It's the same step with the shadows on the teeth, using an exposure layer on each individual layer, and then the scales. So the reason why I did clipping mask was for the scales, so that I didn't have to manually mask each individual scale layer to the different sections. I could just drop it on there and link it to that layer. But later on I make sure the same color happens across the entire creature so that it all is green in luminosity mode, like so. Then I make sure everything's the same size so that it looks cohesive, and put shadows on there using exposure layer that create the little dots, as using a drawing as a reference. And that's why I picked drawing, was so that I could use it as a reference for the shadows like I'm doing here, and creating shadows using exposure layers. Now, as you can see, I'm adding the tongue layer in for the different textures of the mouth, and it's starting to give it lots of life instead of just being a actual solid color, which is really not living. Now I use the metal texture for the base plate, which actually connects to the head and the brain jar, and so that it gives it life. So that's really important, and it actually looks quite cool. I'm using a lasso tool and a marquee tool to create the eyeball selection, and just filling it with white so that it's a actual circle rather than just a big blob mess. And I'm using a bevel and emboss, and then putting a brain in there. So the brain needs to be small enough and visible through the glass, so it's in between the glass layer, and putting waves on there so that it actually looks like it's sitting in water, like so, and making it green so that it gives it a bit of ominous feeling, ominous vibes, you know what I'm saying. Putting glows in them and bubbles in there to make it look like water instead of just weird green stuff. Now I'm using the same metal texture for the top piece of the jar so that it actually looks cohesive, but I don't like the shadows, but anyway, we'll roll with it. And I just did the bevel and emboss. I probably should have done the bevel and emboss, that would have looked so much better. I don't know why I didn't. Next things next, we use a exposure layer to do the opposite of what we did and create highlights. Now I've put it into a dungeon area and put the highlights on there relative to the environment. I hope you liked today's video, guys. I hope you liked learning about my process. I'll see you later. Subscribe for more. See ya. Bye bye.